The marathon, it's an absolute beast. For me, it's been the most challenging road race distance I've ever run. You need all your ducks in a row on marathon day to have a chance of a successful race. Over the years, I've known several runners who've never quite hit their potential over the marathon. Yes, over the years, I've known so many runners, myself included, not hit the marathon times that their 10k and half marathon and perhaps 5k performances would suggest. So in this video, we're going to be taking you through 5 reasons why you might not be converting your shorter distance times into good marathon performances. So the first and most obvious question to address is, how do you know what marathon times you should be performing at based on perhaps your 5k, 10k and half marathon times? There are various calculators you can access online, and one that we use in particular for ourselves and the runners we work with is called the VDot calculator, and I'll put a link to it in the description below. So what the VDot calculator enables you to do is to put in any time you've run over the recognised road racing distances and to see what times you should in theory be capable of across the whole gamut from 1 mile up to marathon.
I plugged my half marathon time into the VDot calculator, 84 minutes and 15 seconds. From this you can see that my marathon came out at 2:55.55. This is just 7 seconds short of my 2:56.02, and I probably lost those 7 seconds when I stopped to stretch my calves during the race.
Whereas you can see from my half marathon time of 73.40, which I actually achieved, my marathon time should have been 2:34.06 or thereabouts. I only ever ran 2:42.10 at best. I in fact ran 2:42 twice, but can never get those extra 8 minutes or anywhere near them. So we're going to have a deeper dive into why this might be. So the first and most obvious reason why your marathon times might not reflect your theoretical potential is the fact that your running training isn't geared towards optimal marathon race performance. It may be the case that you're simply not running enough miles to convert your 10k performance into an equivalent marathon performance. Or it may be the case that you are doing enough miles on paper, but you're not doing enough of them around marathon pace or marathon effort to fully optimise your marathon potential. It may even be the case that you've done a good number of miles at the right effort level, but you haven't varied your surface enough. Something Dawn will now tell you about.
When I trained for the Chester Marathon, one of my mistakes was training a lot on one surface.
That's right, I was injured, wasn't I? So I was accompanying on the bike for lots of runs, which meant many of your runs were up and down here. The delightful Transpennine Trail, as we said before, fantastic resource we have for running, but it's flat. And it's a mixture of tarmac and that soft surface. So you were doing lots there and also lots on the treadmill.
That's right, yeah. If you were doing an off-road marathon, you wouldn't run all your training on a tarmac course. So if you're doing a road marathon, then obviously you need to run on tarmac.
So there's a time and a place for running off-road. It's gentler on the legs, but if you do it all off-road, come race day, you're just going to find yourself battered by about halfway. Yeah,
so just mix it up a little bit, but make sure you get enough miles on the surface you're going to run the marathon on.
So let's assume you got your training right, you've done a good number of miles at the right effort level on the right mix of surfaces. The next thing that can lead to you not fulfilling your marathon potential is getting your taper wrong. So in answer to the question, how much should I run during my marathon taper? The answer is, how long is a piece of string? We're all individual, we're all an experiment of one. But as a general rule, you need to cut down the amount you're running. But it's more complicated than that.
There are 3 things to consider when you taper for a marathon. These are the duration of your runs, the intensity of your runs, and the distance of your runs.
So it's a no-brainer to cut back on the duration of your runs. If you've been doing 3-hour-long runs on a Sunday, you don't want to be doing 3 hours the Sunday before your marathon. So you cut back on the duration. You can also cut back on the intensity, but not total, because if you just do easy running for say the 3 weeks before your marathon, your muscles become a little bit less tense. If you don't do any faster running or sharpening, your muscles can become too relaxed. Then when it comes to race day, they're not taught enough to be able to give you that bounce to give you the best marathon performance possible. One thing personally we wouldn't cut back on is the frequency, because if you're running 7 days a week and suddenly cut it down to 3, your body almost goes into semi-shutdown thinking, oh great, come on fellas, right, we've got to relax here, we can just chill out now and turn off from running, which isn't what you want in the approach to a marathon. So we've known people go for 3-week tapers, 2-week tapers, or even 10-day tapers.
If you're a new marathon runner, you wouldn't go far wrong by reducing your mileage to 75%, 50% and 25% of your total mileage.
In the 3 weeks before your marathon. So the third reason you may not be hitting your marathon performance based on your 10k and half marathon times is race day logistics. So over the years I've worked out that I don't travel very well. So if you're in the UK like we are, you might look at the fastest marathon course, which due to the excellent work of Tim Gross has statistically been shown to be Manchester. I think I'll do Manchester Marathon because it's the fastest. However, if you live in Kent and you've got a long journey up to Manchester and perhaps you work on a Friday and having to travel Friday night or Saturday morning before the marathon, the better bet for you would probably be the London Marathon. The further complication is when people travel abroad. We've known a couple of people recently travel over to Berlin Marathon, which on paper is one of the, if not the fastest course in the world, where world records are broken. And yet they came away with, for them, disappointing times. So factors such as sitting in a car for long periods of time, hunched up, deactivating your glutes and hip flexors can detract from your performance. The stress of airports, waiting around, having flights cancelled, etc, etc, can all lead to unnecessary drain on your reserves in those crucial 48 hours before the marathon.
Also, when you get to the city or town that you're staying in, you'll obviously be staying overnight. Now, you may be staying in a hotel. We've had some terrible experiences of staying in hotels the night or two before a marathon. On one instance I can think of in London, we had to be moved from our room about 3 o'clock in the morning because there was an air vent broke and so much noise coming through, neither of us was sleeping. So that's something to consider that could actually detract from your race performance.
Yeah, so now we tend to go for marathons which either we can travel to on the morning of the race, and we're blessed up here with Manchester 45 minutes, well literally in that direction down this old railway line, or York 50 odd minutes away in that direction. But you may have noticed the other week Dawn did the Abingdon Marathon, and one of the factors for choosing that, apart from being a decent course, is the fact that around the town of Abingdon it's a rural area and there were plenty of quiet Airbnbs to choose from. We had quite a nice accommodation, didn't we?
We did indeed, yes, a lovely lodge.
Another beauty of staying in your own place the night before a marathon, or an Airbnb where you can do your own cooking, is you can control what you eat. Now, I was probably in the best shape of my life around 2009, and we entered the Paris Marathon, a fast course, a few undulations, but one I could certainly have expected to run sub 240 on. I was in that shape. But we're in Paris for 2 or 3 days before, eating out all the time because we're staying in a hotel, and the French give you bread with every meal. Bread with your starter, bread with your main course. Bread, bread, bread.
And you might think that's good carbohydrates.
However, for someone like me with a mild gluten intolerance, which I didn't really know about at the time, come race day, I felt a bit sluggish, a bit bloated. Still ran okay, 2:45, but didn't hit that time that I thought I was capable of.
On many occasions when we did the London Marathon, we often have to trek across the city on the tube in crowded conditions. Those of you who've done London know what it feels like, sardines in a tin.
And then you get up, is it Maze Hill?
Yeah.
Bursting for a wee, nowhere to go, 10-minute walk to the start, long toilet queues.
And that actually can cause a little bit of stomach distress, having to need the toilet before the race. And obviously the trek across is also burning energy.
Whereas Abingdon Marathon, park half a mile from the start line and a gentle walk down. The other thing about big city marathons is they often want you to go to the expo to pick your number up. and buy stuff from their sponsors.
Yeah.
So when I used to do London, I'd have to go down on Saturday morning, because I was working Friday, and the best London marathon I ever did, 2:42:35, I actually asked a clubmate and friend of mine to go and sign for my number, which you could back in those days. I saved my energy. So the fourth thing that can lead to marathon underperformance is race day nerves. Wanting to do well too badly, wanting to run the absolutely perfect race in terms of mile splits and heart rate progression. And it's something I've been guilty of in the past. When I did my PB, I remember getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, stressing about having a minor niggle and going out for a 2-mile run beforehand.
That's not something I've ever done, actually. I think I've always gone into marathons feeling quite relaxed. Obviously I get normal race day nerves, but in general I tend to be pretty relaxed on the start line. I tend to think this is just a victory lap after all the training that you've done.
I must say, my later marathon career, I did think I'm going to change my way of thinking and get myself a different set of rules and put my best foot forward. And what I did, instead of stressing about running the perfect time, I just thought, it's a race. What do I do with other races like the 10Ks and half marathons I was doing well in? Or what I did is I stand on the start line, I try and execute that race as best I could, beat as many people as I could on the day, and then the time will be whatever my best effort, the course conditions and the weather conditions would allow. And it took the stress out of marathon racing. And the fifth and final reason why your marathons might not be going to plan is poor race execution.
We've all been guilty of mispacing races, probably shorter distance races. However, if you get it wrong in a marathon, you really are in for a difficult time in the later miles.
That's right, the general advice we would give for anybody running a marathon is to try and run a slight negative split or an even split. Definitely don't try and get time in the bank to hang on to it in the second half, because you won't. Yeah, mispace a marathon and you'll end up going off the rails pretty quickly. Now, to execute a marathon well, you have to go into it fueled properly. So it's very important to think about your fueling during those last few days of the taper, through the Thursday, Friday and Saturday. What are you eating? Are you getting the right mix of carbs and protein? Not eating too much fibre, which will go straight through you. And I must admit, that's something over the years I've always found very difficult to get exactly right.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a stomach of steel, so I tend to be okay when it comes to fueling for a marathon, as long as I'm getting, you know, a lot of carbs in and reduce the fibre, I'm fine. In-race fueling is also very important. In my last marathon, I took a gel every 3 miles.
And that sufficed for you? Yeah, so one of the reasons why people's marathons might go wrong is getting their in-race fueling incorrect. They might not be taking on board enough carbs during the marathon. They might not have tested out that the gels or the drinks are going to take on to fuel that marathon and end up with an upset stomach.
So it's important that you actually trial out your gels when you're training on your longer runs. If you find one doesn't work for you, then you have the opportunity to try another brand.
So I've taken you through 5 reasons there why people commonly underachieve at the marathon. The training, the race day logistics, the tapering, dealing with nerves on race day, and the pacing and race day execution. But there are still several marathons I've done where I think I've got all those pretty spot on, and yet I still couldn't get anywhere near that 2:34 time my half marathon time says I was capable of.
So maybe we just need to reframe what we mean by achievement.
Yeah, we have a little Facebook group where there's lots of people we know on there, and we discuss topics of running interest. And I asked on there about how people's marathon times stacked up to the shorter distance times. And as well as myself, there were 2 other people on there who I know have trained very intelligently over several years, have had coaching, have thought diligently about all the points we've made in the videos before, and still, like myself, never quite hit that marathon time. One of them said he was actually lactate tested, and the test came back that 10 miles would be his optimum distance, and that's shown in his race performances. He's run decent marathons like myself, but not got all his ducks in a line like the VDot calculator would suggest. And another runner commented that his sweet spot was in racing between 30 minutes and 90 minutes. So again, that would produce an excellent 10K time, 10-mile time and half marathon time, but not quite the marathon time which everything else would suggest.
So for some people, it may not actually be about how they train, how they fuel, how they execute the race, but just down to the way their body is made up, down to the genetics, to the mechanics of their body.
That's right. So instead of thinking, I underachieved at the marathon because I never ran a 2:34, perhaps I should be thinking I really achieved well at 10k and half marathon, and didn't quite get a marathon performance in line with those like Dawn did, but I should be proud of what I did across all distances. Just like Eliud Kipchoge's never going to win the 100-meter gold at the Olympics, or Usain Bolt was never going to run 2 hours for the marathon, we just have to accept celebrating what we're good at, enjoying doing the things that don't quite hit our sweet spot, and being proud of everything we've achieved. And also in that group there are people who have run outstanding marathon times but to date can't quite get their 5k and 10k times down in line with it. Are they going to mope around thinking I failed over 10k, or are they going to think I'm a fantastic marathon runner?
Yes, some folk are just going to be better at longer distance than shorter distance, and vice versa.
As long as you know you've done all the inputs right, the training, the preparation, the logistics, and you've executed it as best you can on the day, be proud of what that result is. So we hope you've enjoyed this video on thinking about marathon underperformance and whether it is actually underperformance. If you have, please give it a like to help with our YouTube algorithms. If you want to see more of our training, racing, parkrun and general running content, then consider subscribing. We put up 2 to 3 videos a week to keep you entertained. And if you're interested in marathon running in particular, you might enjoy this video I produced a few weeks ago on whether at the age of 54 I'm still capable of a sub-3 marathon.
So until next time, keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on.